LIFEWAVE, please welcome to stage TV host, media correspondent, and international journalist, and your host and MC for the 20th anniversary LIFEWAVE conference, Elwin Lopez.
Welcome to LIFEWAVE's 20th anniversary, and a huge congratulations to the brand partners who were celebrated last night. You are all a testament as to why LIFEWAVE has been able to succeed for 20 years, and so many more to come. Okay, before we get started, can we please talk about the Blues Brothers last night? Unbelievable! What a blast from the past. And then that drone show, I was like, I have never seen anything like this in my entire life. Just unbelievable. Before we kick things off here tonight, you have seen some frequency slides. I don't know if you know this, but thousands of you have come over from more than 30 countries across the globe. So there are different languages, and if you're having any issues with some of those frequency slides, there's a frequency translation booth outside. Now, I want to kick things off here with someone who I met just 2 days ago, an incredible growth leader with more than 30 years of direct selling experience. This woman is a force, okay? She has been in the field through strategy and thinking big, planning big, executing even bigger. She has made it into the corporate executive office. It is my incredible honor today to introduce LIFEWAVE President Meredith Burkage.
How's everybody this morning? How is everybody this morning? We're so excited for this weekend. We have been working for the last 6 months preparing for this time, and to get to actually have all of it culminate to this moment and get to hand it over to you. We are so incredibly inspired by what's about to happen, and we just want to make sure that all of you are focused and centered and ready to really be the light. As I mentioned last night, for those of you that were with us for that incredible Blues Brothers moment, drone show, everything, all of the above, and thank you to the team for the great 20-year look back. Thank you to all of the leaders that we recognized last night, who've been part of it since the very beginning, and those of you that have just joined us. We chose this Be the Light conference because it really is where it all begins at LIFEWAVE. We know that we are creatures of light, that light is in our DNA. It is who we are as people, and that we are called to be the light in a dark world. And so as we join this conference today and we start thinking about it, what's really important to look at in our own lives is, how are we being the light? And a number of you have been asked, what does be the light mean to you? But I want you to really just be quiet in this moment and think about your life. Think about all of the people that look to you to be an inspiration. All of the people that look to you for leadership. And how is your light shining? Is it shining bright like a beacon? Is it maybe just a little bit of a spark? And if it's just a spark today, that's okay, because all light began with a spark.
A life empowered is closer than you think. We're all looking for a better way. Reimagine what's next with a new sense of exuberance. Why not power on like you mean it? Or power off blissfully. A better sleep is a better awake. You've never moved like this before. With the energy nature intended. Imagine reprogramming the way you look, at the speed of science, at longevity, at exhilaration. It's next level rejuvenation. Take control of your well-being from the inside out and outside in. The light within is ready to ignite. Be the light. LifeWave.
So, if that is really your first opportunity to see the Be the Light theme, it isn't just about this conference, because we are going through a brand transformation as we move into these next 20 years. 20 years there, 20 years in front, and we are going to begin to capture more and more in our assets, more and more in the tools, encompassing being the light. Because again, it is our very foundation when we think of ourselves. It is our brand identity. And for somebody like those of us that have been in direct selling for our careers, who have been out there recently in years where people are looking at the channel of direct selling and saying, where does direct selling line up for entrepreneurs to have an opportunity to experience freedom? We know that LifeWave is going to be a beacon of hope and light for entrepreneurs that are interested in sharing and carrying products that they are passionate about. It is our brand identity to be a beacon not only of health and wellness and vibrance and freedom, but also direct selling, a channel, a sector that some of us have devoted our lives to and love, because we know it's the ultimate place where ordinary people can experience the extraordinary. So many of you in this room, I've heard you speak. I've watched your webinars. I've seen your Facebook Lives. I've heard you speak from stage. You are really, really good at talking about how X39, our banner flagship product, the center of who we are, that X39 works to, again, ignite those signals in our body, which help us to become brighter and brighter the more that we use the products and the more that we, of course, share the love. So because as we share the love, that's really when, as a community, we get brighter and brighter. So again, you're going to hear a number of testimonials about what does Be the Light mean to you, but we encourage you to really think about it. Because Be the Light, when the marketing teams and the creatives and David Schmidt and everybody came together to say, what is it that we really want to bring forth as we look forward to the next 20 years? And Be the Light became the center of that message. Because Be the Light really means about discovering human potential. And that when you look around your world and you look at the lives of people that you care about, how can we impact them and inspire them with our own lives, that they may want to look inside and become a discovery piece of their existence as well. It can be, of course, a scientific point of fact. We are light. We shine from within. We radiate. We can be that light. Or Be the Light also means living for God, living for the ultimate light. The ultimate light. To be the light, not hiding under a bushel on a hill, but shining brightly, again, with love and compassion and care. So as we look at this radiance that we're looking to explain, there are really three pieces to being the light that's the most important. And we know this, right? We know this. It is about discovery. It is about owning your own journey, but you have to see the light, because until your eyes are opened, you are in darkness. Whether it's in darkness of a way out of a tricky situation in your life, whether it's spiritual awareness, you need to see, and it is up to us to shine so that others can see, so that they will truly be able to know that there is more out there for them. There is more to life than what they're living right now. Even if they have a great life, can it always be better? Can life always get better? Can we always do better, be better? Can we? Yes? Good. And so as we prepare other people, we need to first prepare ourselves this weekend as we go into these days of discovery. Because not only do we need to see the light, but we need to ourselves be fully charged. There's an illustration, some of you may have heard it, but if you are a pitcher of water and you are pouring yourself into other people and pouring yourself into people and pouring yourself into people, at some point, if you do not get your own pitcher refilled, you run dry. And so these next 2 days are all about you being filled, you about charging your battery. And we know what the patches do. We know what the patches do to get us charged, right? Of course. But these 2 days are about you soaking it in so that you can have things stimulating your brain, so that you can be using the products. Hopefully you got some patches. If not, we brought lots for you. Because again, we need to recharge that God-given DNA miracle that is within us. We are meant to be fully charged. We are meant to be electric. We are meant to ignite and light the world. We are designed by our Creator to be the light. And so as we are soaking up the wisdom, this fully charged situation, you are sitting around a lot of light right now. Look at your neighbor. Just look at your neighbor and say, thank you for being the light. Thank you for being the light. Thank you, all of you, for being our light. And so as we look at the methodologies, what we're going to hear from stage, do you know that over the last 30 years, all of the surveys that I have seen coming out of big events like this, big decisions happen at big events, the number one takeaway that everybody enjoys the most is networking. They love the announcements, but they love the conversations and they love meeting people because they're going to have the tools that we're going to be showing you, but it is you charging each other, getting an idea, one nugget that you can take away. So as I close out my time of just setting up this incredible life-changing event today, I want to encourage you once again to see the light, to be the light, and to share the light with the world. LifeWave!
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There is more information there than most people would ever realize. I was 8 years old, and my parents wanted to take me to the workshop of Thomas Edison. On the drive back home, I said to my dad, I want to be an inventor. Light, as it turns out, is the primary control mechanism for everything else that happens in the body. What if we could have an external electromagnetic field that would essentially reset the stem cells that are already in our bodies and get them to function like younger, healthier cells? What if in the process we actually found out that in a book that was written thousands of years ago, that information already existed? God has left his fingerprint in natural design, and that blueprint shows up in nature. The mathematical codes are identical. The implications to this are absolutely extraordinary. What drives me is that there's this enormous sense of hope that we can create technology to generate clean energy, that we can have foods that aren't genetically modified, and we can meet all of the needs on the planet that we have to, and that we can heal people.
A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to meet the brightest light, one of the very brightest lights I've met in my life, and certainly the brightest light that I've met in over a decade. I know David Schmidt is a bright light to each and every one of you in this room. And so I would like to bring an innovator, an inventor, a creator, a person who pours his life into all of us to make the world a better place and to help us to be that guiding light for millions of people around this world. Please help me welcome to the stage our founder, our CEO, David Schmidt.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You all have a great time last night? Okay. I'm going to start off. I have a confession to make. My wife's very nervous. It is incredibly difficult to buy a Christmas present for me. Really difficult. Every year, my mother-in-law will ask me, "What do you want for Christmas?" Every year, I say to her the same thing: I want world peace. And she'll say, you know, that's a tall order, but I'll see what I can do. But I'm obsessed with this idea that is there a way we could get human beings to stop trying to kill each other? That's it. Really simple. How do we do that? So for years, we have been stimulating the body with light. That's how these patches work. We gently stimulate the body with light, and we produce these amazing effects. But what if we could take light inside of our body? What if there was a way we could create a technology that would release light from within? Today, you're going to see that technology. This day, this weekend, marks the next generation of LIFEWAVE. The first 20 years have all been about LIFEWAVE technology and patches. Now we are going to expand on that. Instead of just stimulating the body with light, we are going to explore an entirely new generation of light therapy technology. So, what benefits could we expect to see from this? First thing is, this technology is an entirely new way to elevate NAD. So at least some of you know that, what that is. So NAD is a key molecule involved in age reversal. And it is an energy-carrying molecule within the cell. If we can elevate NAD, we can turn on energy production, we can reset genes to a more youthful state. The next thing that we find with this technology is that we can support healthy levels of human growth hormone, keeping us young and healthy. We can regain and build new strength, stamina, and muscle with this. And the results are really shocking about how quickly this happens. When we're ramping up energy production, we are supporting the natural healing process. And you're going to see that one of the things that we can do with this is turn on the production of collagen. And ultimately, we will use this technology to stay younger longer. So increasing NAD, supporting growth hormone levels, more strength in muscle, natural healing, and living younger longer. These are 5 new benefits that are all coming from one new machine. So today, you are going to meet our new LIFEWAVE water technology. There is a lot of information that we're going to present. I'm going to go through some of this very quickly. So if you want to take pictures, feel free to do that. So how do we go about and create an entirely new technology surrounding water? There have been structured water products that have already been on the market for many years. We can add different types of minerals to water. We can change the surface tension of water. Is there anything else new that we could do that would be meaningful? Well, let's take a look and start at the very beginning and talk about composition of matter. So this is the periodic table. Each of the elements, you can think of it as a building block. So this is what we have to work with in the spectra of creating new materials. Let's start with something very simple. Let's start with tin. Tin is a relatively simple element. It's used in electronics, and pretty much everything that someone who is a chemist or a physicist would want to know about tin is already well known. We take tin and we combine it with oxygen in the presence of heat, and we get a tin oxide. Nothing entirely remarkable about this. It's extremely well known. But we created a device in our lab. I have multiple patents on this now. And we expose the tin and the oxygen to a very special type of electromagnetic and longitudinal field. And this will change the bond angle between the oxygen and the tin, creating something that looks like gold, and creating a material that never existed before. And here's the really interesting part. By changing the frequencies or changing the wavelengths of light that we work with, we can change the bond angle. Now, when you have light reflecting off of a surface, that's how you're going to get color. And so by changing the bond angle, we change the angle at which light is going to reflect off that surface, and as a result, we can change the color. So we've made these metals that look like gold, orange, red, blue, purple, just by changing and manipulating the matter with frequencies of energy. So we did something really fun. We created a LIFEWAVE 20th anniversary coin from this material that never existed before, and we gave this coin to our qualified senior presidential directors. Okay, so very quickly, here is a laboratory report that we did. So when we are going to run these tests, how do we know that this material never existed before? Well, quite simply, we hired a laboratory. We used a technique called X-ray diffraction. We sent the material out, and it came back, as you can see here, unknown phase. So they compared this material to 60,000 other materials and found out that it had never existed before. And you can see a peak on the left that's showing that it's novel and unique. And then here is a laboratory report. No tin or tin oxide reference patterns matched this phase. So a unique, novel material. Okay. So here's the important thing, is that these experiments showed that we could manipulate matter with energy. We could create new matter. That's an extraordinarily powerful tool. So the question is, what are we going to do with this new technology? What frequencies would we use and why? That's a pretty good question. We should have a mathematical model for this. My dad is a music teacher, so I grew up around music. And when we look at the musical scale, we see the musical scale is based off of 440 hertz tuning. And so if we were to look at the frequencies which are associated with the musical scale, we can see them listed over here. And you'll notice immediately this is a little bit unusual, right? Why do we have all of these odd numbers? It looks very, very random. And we see that this musical scale came in 1834 from the German natural scientists. Seems kind of unusual that they would create this 440 hertz tuning. Well, is there a way that we could mathematically extrapolate what musical tuning should be based on? So let's do this. We take a chart, and on the vertical column, we're going to put the number 2, horizontal column, we're going to take the number 3. And all we're going to do is we're going to double the numbers on the vertical column, and we're going to triple the numbers over on the horizontal column. And then we're going to take the product of each. So in other words, 2 times 3 is 6, 4 times 3 is 12, and so forth. And we continue to fill out these columns this way. Okay. Now, as we're creating this chart, we get to the number 432. So 432 is very close to 440. So let's see if we could create a musical scale based on 432 hertz instead of 440 hertz. Thank you. Wasn't my idea, but I appreciate it anyway. Now, here's another thing that's very interesting. I have a friend, Terry McGrath, who is a physicist, and he has a patent called the Physical Quantum Atomic Model of the Atom. And in that model, an atom, you never heard of that before? Am I only one that did the homework? My goodness. Okay. So 108 is the number of resonant nodes within an atom. So this starts to make sense. In other words, if you want to affect matter, you should have a model that allows for manipulating the atom with resonance. And that would be based on 108 hertz, or 108 nodes within the atom. So this started to look very promising. So now we have our existing musical scale based on 440, and now we look over at 432. What would that look like? So we just simply go to our chart, and we fill it out based on the frequencies that are in each column. So in other words, when you take the vertical column based on 2, or the horizontal row based on 3, and then you multiply that and get the product, what you end up with, each column represents a different musical note. And everything fits perfectly. And of course, in music, we have a note A at 432. If we go up an octave, the next frequency is 864. Or, of course, we can take any harmonic of that. So it could be 108, 256, 432, 864, and so forth. So there's our new musical scale. So how can we apply this information? Well, here's what we did. We created this device called a double helix conductor. And if we're going to try to work with the natural world, then let's have a electromagnetic field that nature would use. So in this case, a double helix, DNA. So the idea was that we were going to take these musical notes and musical frequencies and plug them through this device and see if we could have any effect on matter. So one of the things we want to do is heal people faster. We want to increase protein synthesis. So at the time, we were in California. And as it turns out, when you're in California and you want to grow plants, there's a number of companies that are very interested in accelerating the growth rate of plants. It's very easy to work with these companies and do experiments. So that's what we did. If I could do a Bill Clinton impersonation now, I would. I never smoked, never inhaled, or however that goes. That was terrible. That was more like Trump. That wasn't Clinton. All right. I'm not going to do a Trump impression, honey, don't worry. So this is what we did. We had our control group. They kind of look like Christmas trees. And we have our treatment group. And you can see right away what we found was that exposing these plants to these energy fields increased the rate of protein synthesis. This is extremely important. And we can see if we look at this and treat an entire column of plants, we can get this effect. So commercially, this has a value. Now, of course, we want to apply this to human beings. So we did this work at the National University of Ireland in Galway, and we worked with the Regenerative Medicine Institute, Dr. Tim O'Brien. And this was an experiment that we did with rabbits. So these rabbits had diabetic ulcerations. We applied this field, and right away, we found that we could accelerate the rate of repair in this open wound using this technology. So this was the first evidence that we had, that there was a way that you could, without any stem cells injections, without any drugs, just using energy, you could accelerate the way that people would heal. So our focus now, of course, we went through many years of selling X39 and doing multiple studies on X39, showing how it activates stem cells and improves healing. Now our goal is a little bit different. We're still interested in accelerating the rate at which people heal, but now what we want to look at is, can we apply these techniques to longevity? Can we stop the human aging process? Can we keep people younger longer? How are we going to do this? And are there any examples in nature? So one of the things that we did is we take a biomimetic view, meaning we want to look to nature and see if we can copy nature and create new technology. So one of the examples that we used were temnothorax ants. Temnothorax ants, they get infected with a parasite, and as a result, it alters their gene expression, so they overexpress cytochrome C oxidase, and as a result, mitochondrial function gets upregulated. They end up producing more ATP. And in the process, they live 5 to 6 times longer than normal. So could we apply this technology? So here was the control group. We took a gel and a growth media that's used for cultivating ants, and we populated the media with ants. So they went to work producing tunnels. Then we took our treatment group and we exposed them to this energy field. And that's what happened. So we were able to show that we could take a mechanical device and transfer energy from that device over to a living system where it would increase the energy in the ant and the ant could end up doing more useful work. So this is very key, because what we know from other experiments is that if you can increase the amount of energy that's available in a living system, gene expression changes to a more youthful state. So, what does this have to do with human beings? Well, this is a link now, and a missing piece in longevity. As people age, the amount of energy in their cells decline, mitochondrial dysfunction. So if we can have a technology that can reverse that, we can, at minimum, keep people younger longer. The next model that we went to was working with lobsters. And as it turned out, the technology that you're going to see today is based off of how lobsters completely defy the aging process. Now, I have another confession to make. When we first built this equipment in our lab, I have a lot of really talented engineers that I work with, and we were setting all of this up and going through all these trials, and we got the first drops of this new water coming out of the machine. I said, I've done it. I've created lobster water. And so I was telling Meredith about this, and I was talking to Wayne about this. And I said, guys, this is incredible. We have this new technology. I call it lobster water. It's going to revolutionize health. And Meredith said, question, is it too late to change the name? Needless to say, your product will not be called lobster water. But it is the key to bringing light into the body. And let's go to the video.
For those curious about the intersection of science, faith, and naturalism, there sure are some fascinating conversations and facts out there that speak to the concept of intelligent design, the debate on God's existence, the age of the earth, unfathomable mathematical coincidences, Bible codes, and more. For instance, with over 11 million followers on YouTube, Destin Sandlin from Smarter Every Day recently visited Vanderbilt University to do research with his camera rolling on the existence of something called the flagellar motor.
The implications for a biomechanical motor are insane.
Think this bacteria is somehow moving just to move? Think again.
This bacteria has an operating system.
Yeah.
It has sensors.
Yeah.
It has effectors. It has actuators.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it has feedback.
Yeah,
and
feedback.
I'm getting emotional.
I know,
because it's so it's a neat design, is what I'll say.
It is. It is.
And it is all made out of molecules and looks like a sophisticated biomechanical motor that only recently was brought into focus through intense magnification imaging and modeled by the School of Pharmacology at Vanderbilt. It's made up of molecules and is here by chance?
So the flagellar motor exists, and it's amazing. It's complex, and it reminds me of an electric motor, and I love it. Like, I love this thing, and I think it's incredible. There are implications for the fact that something so complex exists and is so integral to the creation of human life. I mean, this is fascinating stuff. So it also opens up a huge debate. People say, well, how can something this complex come to be out of nothing? The logic goes like this. If this motor system is composed of complex individual parts, and all these parts work together to perform the overall function of rotating, then how did the individual parts come to be? Did it all have to happen at the same time? What were the steps these components took to assemble into such a complex molecular machine in the first place?
Okay. So, let's talk about for a moment if we seriously want to take on this subject of human aging and we want to look at, is it biologically possible to stop aging and hopefully someday reverse it? Is there any evidence that this could possibly exist? Well, what's so interesting is that when we go back to 2018, when we had the start of the release of X39, we knew that this was going to mobilize stem cells in the body, that this was going to support natural healing, it was going to turn on energy production, help to regulate inflammation in the body, support overall natural healing. We started to see testimonials where it looked like people were becoming younger. Here was one example. One person likes that. $5,000 people like that. So we started to see this evidence that as people began using X39, they showed physical signs of becoming younger. And in some cases, the results were dramatic. It certainly wasn't that case with everyone. I wish it was, but it wasn't that case with everyone. But we did have dramatic testimonials like this. So the question is, what's going on here? What can we learn, and can we come up with technology to apply this to everyone? Because it certainly looks like it's possible to at least reverse part of the aging process. And certainly copper peptide will do that. So let's take a look through the literature. And this is fascinating. I've used this example before, but it's worth emphasizing again. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is the hormone that we associate with love. It's the hormone that's released when a woman gives birth, so it allows for bonding between, I was going to say a woman. Is that okay to say these days? I think it's okay, right? Yeah. I'm going to say it anyway because I know there's men and women. And a woman is a woman. Okay? As a matter of fact, I think you should elect me to the Supreme Court because I can say what a woman is. Okay. All right. Anyway. So that's how it works. Now, here's the really interesting thing, though, about oxytocin, is that if we take old muscle tissue and we expose it to oxytocin, it will have a rejuvenation effect on that muscle tissue. So the muscle fibers begin to look like and resemble young, healthy tissue. So this can't happen unless we're having an effect on the genes. Now, we can understand this from the perspective of biochemistry. So when we're in a state of love, there's a state of reduced stress, anxiety, the body's calm, we're conserving antioxidants, there's less inflammation in the body. And ultimately, when we're not in a chronic state of inflammation, that means we're protecting our DNA. So it's kind of easy to understand on this on a biochemical process when we're thinking of prevention, but when we're thinking about age reversal, that's an entirely different subject. There's more going on here than simple biochemistry. So let's see if we can understand that. So let's take a look at lobsters. We're going to use lobsters as a biological model. And lobsters are able to defy aging. There have been lobsters that have been found that are over 130 years old. And lobsters don't age during that process. So if you were to examine the muscle of the lobster that's 130, it would look like it is young and healthy. There's no type of oxidative stress, no inflammatory stress, no signs of aging whatsoever. In fact, as lobsters get older, they get stronger. So we want to understand this. They're not going to die due to old age. Lobsters will be killed by a predator like human beings. They're going to get sick, or they're going to outgrow their shells. Those are the mechanisms in which a lobster is going to meet their end, but it doesn't happen through normal aging. So when scientists look at an explanation in the scientific literature, the prevailing theory is that this all has to do with the telomeres. Excuse me. So this is based on telomere biology, meaning that telomeres are the rods on the end of chromosomes, and they're going to control the number of cell divisions. So as we age, as human beings age, these telomere rods get shorter and shorter until finally we're in our 70s and our cells can no longer multiply and divide. In lobsters, that process never happens. Lobsters, their cells will continue to divide an infinite number of times. So of course, humans have these telomeres, and one of the searches today in telomere biology is to look for either a drug or a naturally occurring material that can keep the telomeres lengthened. So, all that information is true. However, what we found in our research is that this was not the whole story. It was part of the story, but it doesn't explain everything. So, what if there's more going on here? Let's see what we can learn. What if there is some natural living code that's responsible for the lobster's immortality? We already know that everything in the body is controlled by light. It's the way we were created, it's the way we were designed, and it's very easy to prove scientifically. The electromagnetic systems in the body, the electrical systems in the body control the biochemistry. So there must be a way to tap into this. How are the lobsters using their energy fields to prevent aging? That's what we want to know. So since we are in the business of treating the body with light, a valuable tool is spectrophotometry. Spectrophotometry is going to measure the energy that is absorbed or reflected or emitted by a material. And depending on the device, this will happen in the UV, visible, or the IR spectra. So we get our light source, it goes through a lens to help focus this, we get a spectra of light, and then we look to see when we're testing a material, how that material responds to these different wavelengths of light. So another question is, if we're going to look for the secret of longevity in a lobster, where are we going to look? So we have a research tool to do the examination, but where are we going to find the secret? Well, we can look to the Bible, because the Bible is going to contain incredible information. We go to the book of Genesis, and we go to the story of Noah. So there's evil upon the earth, and we could probably learn from this lesson today. There's evil upon the earth. God regrets creating human beings and wants to wipe everything out and start over, but he finds that Noah is righteous, and Noah is the one good man and his family on the planet. So Noah and his family are going to be saved. So we all know the story. So what's interesting here is how human lifespan changes in the Bible. As a matter of fact, there is a statistical analysis on this which shows that if you take the ages of people in the Bible as it's represented through these generations, that it forms a statistically significant decay curve. In other words, those ages were not in the Bible as a random number. They're an accurate representation of exactly what happened. And so what can we learn from this? Well, God says to Noah, okay, now you can go and eat the flesh of animals. So presumably, before the flood, people were vegans. We're eating fruits and vegetables. But now we're going to go ahead and eat the flesh of animals, but don't eat the blood, because the life is in the blood. So what if we were to take that literally? What if there was something in blood that hadn't been discovered? We all know what blood is meant to do, but maybe there's something else there that's been overlooked. So let's take a look. For lobster blood, there's a number of different varieties. And we turn to this scientist that's an expert, Robert Baer. And he's been studying lobsters his entire life. And we had a very interesting conversation with him. And one of the things that came out of this was that lobster hemolymph was being used as a treatment for COVID-19. And lobster blood is based on copper, of course. So what's hemocyanin? Hemocyanin is a copper-containing protein. So lobsters are the Vulcans on this planet. For all you Star Trek fans. So happy we got some Star Trek fans here today. Okay. A lot of Star Trek fans, all right. So, of course, we can't help but notice that in human beings, GHK is bound to copper, and that will reset about 1/3 of the human genome to a younger state. So I think it's fair to say, would a similar mechanism be going on in lobsters? Does the copper content have anything to do with the longevity? So we could look there. And what's the connection? So we pull up this research study that's done by Professor Joseph Kunkel. That's a big lobster. I'm not sure if it's just coming out of a broiler, though. I think it's alive, but I'm not sure. That would feed a lot of people. And here's what the spectrophotometry chart is going to look like on this. And I started to notice when I looked at this data that there were these peaks that were going on at 550 nanometers and 400 nanometers. So the visible spectra is between 400 and 700 nanometers. Anything under 400 is up in the UV range. Below 700 is in the infrared range. And you can see that there's these interesting effects that occur where these three different samples intersect between 700, 710 nanometers, and 525 nanometers. Okay, I know this is getting technically boring, but there's a reason why we want to go through this. So a moment ago, we were talking about musical scale and 432 hertz. So we did these experiments, and we showed that if we put music, essentially, into these electromagnetic coils, that we could accelerate the way that people healed. What does this have to do with wavelengths of light in lobster blood? Is there any possible connection? So the immediate thing that we notice is that if we start with a 432 based tuning and then we double the number, we're going up in octaves. So here's what I did. I took 432 and you continue to double it. And you can also put this into a online calculator for converting frequency over to wavelength. So there's a number of ways to make this calculation, but basically you can convert a musical note over to a wavelength of light. So that's what I did here. And we end up with 400, when you do the calculation, you end up with 432 hertz, equal to approximately 631 nanometers. Now, I'll tell you why that's interesting. It's interesting because in the scientific literature, 630 nanometer light is one of the wavelengths of light that's used to turn on mitochondrial function. And 440 hertz is not. All musical instruments should be tuned to 432 hertz because it is harmonic with the human body. It actually promotes energy and healing. Alternatively, we can use 630 nanometer light to turn on mitochondrial function. But we're still going to, if we do that, we're still going to be stimulating the outside of the body. And the patches are still superior in this sense because we can turn on specific peptides in the body that you can't with normal light. But this is a very powerful piece of information. So let's take a look at this. So we go back to our lobster data, and now we have 550 nanometers is one wavelength of light that's coming off of lobster blood. 630 nanometers, we took that number based off of 432 hertz tuning because that's what we were using in our experiments. And my hypothesis was that 630 nanometer light is in the lobster, we just didn't detect it in the lobster blood. So I had that hypothesis. And then the other wavelength of light was somewhere on the chart, it would be somewhere between 700 and 709 nanometers, roughly. Those are the wavelengths we were working with. So this was my first invention that came off this process. I call it a biophotonic reflector and ended up getting several patents on this. And if you look inside this device, you'll see that we have a series of optical filters, very high precision optical filters, along with an optical grade mirror. So essentially, we take the light, the naturally occurring biophoton emissions from the human body, they pass through the filters, hit the mirror, and then come back to the human body, but only specific wavelengths of light stimulate the surface of the skin. So that was the idea behind this. Let's see if we could treat the surface of the skin with the same wavelengths of light that are responsible for keeping lobsters young. Did that make sense? Okay, that was the objective. We got 2 to 3 years of age reversal in 10 minutes. And the way we measured this was through looking at the cell capacitance, the size of the cells. So a measure of how cells age is in their size. As we age, the cells will begin to shrink. And the electrical charge of the cell will start to become smaller. It's one of the mechanisms that's not well known about how a healthy cell goes and becomes cancerous tissue and how ultimately cancer can be treated naturally. But that's a different subject. So we can correlate aging to the electrical charge around the cell. So when you use this device, the cells expand, cells become younger. But it's almost too rapid. So we wanted to look for other methods here. Now let's go back to this idea that we can use technology to create new forms of matter. Maybe we could take some of those experiments that we did and apply it to this new knowledge that we have. If we were going to create new matter, what would we do? Hydrogen, as it turns out, has a metallic state. So, of course, we're familiar with hydrogen and water, but if we just take hydrogen, of course, it's a gas. We can compress hydrogen and turn it into a liquid, And of course, that's a cryogenic material. But what's not well known is that hydrogen can actually exist as a metal. So if we go back to these experiments and we say, okay, we took different types of metal. We took bismuth, copper, tin, aluminum, antimony. We put them into the presence of oxygen, exposed them to light and these electromagnetic fields, and we created new matter. What if we could take water and we could break it into hydrogen and oxygen, treat hydrogen like a metal, recombine the hydrogen and oxygen in the presence of a catalyst using a specific type of energy, and reassemble it into a new form of water that never existed before? That was the hypothesis. So if we could achieve this, what it would literally mean is that if we could do it, we could create a new type of water that had photons of light embedded into the bonds of the water, so that when you drank the water, it would release that light into the body. That was the goal here. And that's how we got from where we started to where we are now in this presentation. So I built this machine that was it was a great Tony Stark moment for me. It was maybe about 3 feet wide and about 9 feet long. And we started getting drops of water coming out of this thing. And it was incredible to see it for the first time. But it was so slow, it was so painful. But we did it. So everyone knows what ice looks like. Here's a beaker of distilled water where we freeze it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this new water and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to freeze it. So why do we want to freeze it? Well, it's a phase change. Another hypothesis here is that as water goes from being a liquid to a solid, in chemistry that's a phase change. So can we see whether or not the light in the water is going to be released when the water changes state? Because that would represent a change in the bond angle, so it would make sense to me that the light would be released during that process. And that would be a really great thing, because it would mean that once the water gets into the body, the water will phase change and release the light. So let's see what happens. We started freezing it, and we started to notice these highly coherent threads of water crystals. So this was important because we know that if you were to have a structured water, the water is highly organized. So we start to see some evidence here. And, sorry, I had skipped ahead one. Okay, now we're good. When the water freezes completely, really interesting things happen. We get a vortex funnel that occurs at the center of the beaker. And of course, we associate vortexes with natural energy and living systems. If you look at the beaker from underneath, again, you can see this implosion that occurs as the water crystals move towards the center as compared to the control. As you change the wavelengths of light that we use to treat the water, different shapes start to appear, living shapes start to appear. In some samples, they resemble an egg. And what do we think about eggs? Eggs are life. And depending on the type of water that we use and the treatment and the amount of treatment time, we get an increase in the density of the number of water threads. So what this means is that we can control how much light is in the water through the settings. You probably would like to see this now, right? Okay. We're going to watch now a time-lapse video that we took. What we did in our lab was we took a freezer. Okay, we're going to play it. So just watch it. We have our freezer, and it has a glass front. We have a time-lapse camera. So you're seeing this water sample being frozen over a period of about 4 or 5 hours. So normal ice on the left, and there's our nice vortex funnel and implosion of water on the right. Okay, what do you think? And then sometimes really weird things will happen when we're playing with the settings on the machine. Sometimes we will get these pylons that will rise out of the water, and we get all different types of shapes. My daughter Kelly, who's in our lab, this is her project. She's done a phenomenal job on these experiments, and she calls this a strawberry. So she's making strawberries out of ice in the lab. So now that we have created a new form of water, the question is, and by the way, this is patented already. This was a very quick patent for us. So we'll have just filed another 4 patents on this. We'll have over 20 patents on this technology by the time we're done. So we need to be able to determine if there's any benefits from drinking this water. We've created this new form of water, never existed before. Now we want to know if there's any longevity benefits. But what happened next, I think, was even more incredible. We had created this new water, never existed before. We did it from using a piece of equipment that has only been around since the 1950s, spectrophotometry. So prior to the 1950s, there would have been no way to figure out what wavelengths of light lobsters were emitting, which was fundamental to this discovery. What I found, though, what I didn't expect, is that the same codes, the same living codes that I used to create this technology were found in a book from 5,000 years ago. The key to this discovery was already in the Bible. Let's go to the video.
You know that if you find an Indian arrowhead in a cave, archaeologists will immediately say, oh, intelligence has been here. They carved this Indian arrowhead. But then you point to DNA, which is the most complex information system, language system in the entire universe that makes up our chromosomes, our genes, all the information that builds a human or a dog or a cat or whatever. And secular scientists will say, oh, chance. You know what DNA is? It's like a complex information system. You see, life is built on information. Do you know how much information there is in living systems on this planet? It's not billions, it's not trillions, it's actually zillions of bits of information. And you know what? You've got to have a language to read the information. Do you know DNA not only has an incredible amount of information in it, but it also has the information to make a language to read the information. If you're going to read a book and it's in Russian, you need to know the Russian code or language or you can't read it.
Actually, the word mathematics did not mean the science of quantity until Aristotle. At Plato's time and before that, mathematics just meant learning. That's why the word polymath just means many, poly, learning. So it was synonymous with all learning because mathematics was just the language of all learning. You know, another thing people don't realize is this was an age, Greeks didn't have numbers like we have. They used letters to describe their numbers. So the letter alpha was the number 1. The letter, beta was the number 2. And this was true also in Hebrew, in Phoenician, all the ancient languages. Mm-hmm. They were all using their letters to represent their numbers. It wasn't until we had the benefit of having the Arabs come up with the Arabic numeral system, right? And we got all of the numbers that we currently have. But when you think about that, that means that all of the things that were written had both a literary meaning and a mathematical meaning. And this is there's a whole study of this that people have long ignored, which is called gematria, right? And so there are hidden codes within the Bible that people that study this stuff swear by, because they can find these hidden codes inside of it, because that's the way it was written in the first place.
Okay. So let's take a look at this. And if we're going to look in the Bible, let's start right in the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So, what information could possibly be there where we could learn something new that isn't already self-evident? Well, there is, as it turns out, more information there in this one simple sentence than we might normally think. So let's look at it. First of all, in the beginning. We can think of this as representing the concept of time, past, present, future. God created the heaven. Well, heaven is kind of everything around us. That's space, length, width, and height. And the earth, that represents matter, solid, liquid, gas, plasma. So here in this first sentence, we have the very foundation of everything around us. And actually, this is quite consistent with how we might think of the start of everything. So in other words, God is outside of normal space and time. There's this event called the Big Bang, if that's how everything really began, and then all matter and everything around us came from that. And in this one sentence, all those concepts are there. But let's dig a little bit further. So we're going to look at the book of Genesis in the Hebrew, because we can convert Hebrew over to a numerical code. We can convert the letters over into numbers, and we can convert the words over into numbers. So if we were to look at, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth, in Hebrew, this is what we would see. And we see something very interesting. There's 7 words here, and there's going to be 3 words to the left of center, 3 words to the right of center. That center word can't really be translated into English, not completely. So we have 5 letters to the left and right of center, and the second words have 3 letters. Okay, that's a little interesting. Let's take a look at this another way and use the numerical values. First, let's go back one slide, because actually there was something here I wanted to show you that wasn't here. We can look at this as being a ratio. 3 words out of 7, or 7 words and then 3. 3, 7, 7, 3. Those numbers mirror one another. Oops. Try that again. Okay. So we're going to convert these letters and words over into numbers now, and this is what it's going to look like. So far, they just look like numbers and nothing really much more about that. Oh, there's our 3773. My mistake. Okay, so we got these 7 words total, 3 on the left, 3 on the right. Now, let's just start someplace and let's add all of these numbers together. We come up with 2,701. Okay, so far, nothing really remarkable about that. Apparently, however, 2071 is 37 times 73. 3773. And I want you to remember that 3773, because later on it's going to become very important, because it was foundational to a discovery I made. 37 happens to be the 12th prime number. 73 is the 21st prime number. 1, 2, 2, 1. Those numbers mirror one another. Maybe there's something about that that we're supposed to pay attention to. Now let's have a little bit of fun with this and start to combine some of the different words, what might we find? Well, let's take God, the earth, and the heaven as a concept and add those numbers together. We get the number 777. Interesting? Does it mean anything? Now let's say God and the heaven. That equals 888. Now let's take in the beginning God. And as you might expect, that is 999. So we start to see a pattern begin to form. As an inventor, I'm always looking for patterns. I'm looking for patterns in nature because those patterns are not there by accident. There has to be a meaning behind it. So if the Bible is indeed the inspired word of God, then what you would expect from a being that created everything is that God would have to be the ultimate scientist, physicist, inventor, creator, and that God would put a mathematical code into the Bible for people to discover so we could believe. But maybe it's also an instruction manual. What about that? So I looked at these numbers and I thought, let's go back and look at 3773 again. So 777 is 37 times 7 times 3. That's kind of interesting. 888 is 37 times 8 times 3. And 999, 37 times 3 times 3 times 3. This is starting to not look like a coincidence. And these numerical codes are only the beginning, because you see these numerical codes throughout the Bible. But what does this have to do with lobster blood? Is there any connection there? So we go back to these wavelengths of light. What we had already seen was that 550 nanometers, 630 nanometers, and 700 to 710 nanometers, when we created this biophotonic reflector, we found it was capable of, at least in part, reversing part of human aging. So we have in the book of Genesis the story of creation, the story of human beings, and then ultimately the fall of man. So you might expect, if there's a mathematical code in the Bible, in the story of creation, we might find that same mathematical code in nature. But you can see that these numbers are not the same as 777, 888, 999. So on the surface, well, there doesn't seem to be a pattern there. But wait, 3773. What if instead of that just describing the number of words and the way those words are arranged in the book of Genesis, what if it's a ratio? What if what God is trying to tell us is you need to look at the ratio of these numbers? So that's what I did. Let's take a look at that. There's our biblical code. There's our lobster code. 777 divided by 888 is 0.875. 999 divided by 888 is 1.125. So we're going to take 631 nanometers at the center over here on our wavelengths, multiply it by 0.875, and we find about 550 nanometers. When we're working with light, if we're within 3 to 5 nanometers of a target, it's considered relevant. And when we're looking at spectrophotometry data, that is about the tolerance that we work with. We take 631, multiply it by 1.125, and there is our 710 nanometers. So the implication to this is pretty extraordinary. It shows that there is a mathematical sequence of numbers that aren't there that's arbitrary. And this ratio, same ratio, can be found in living systems. Or Spock would say, it literally is Genesis. Okay. What movie was that from? Anybody know? Star Trek what? Which Star Trek movie? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Star Trek 2. Come on. I know my friend Matt over here knows the answer. He's just not saying anything. Okay. So what does this all mean? Well, I think in simple terms, we can say that the Bible is a historical document. If you were to speak with a Hebraist, they would say it's definitely a historical account. It's written as a historical account of things that actually occurred. So it means as that reference, we can learn from it. But because we can convert the words over into numbers, we can look for patterns there and we can learn from them. And this is all just the beginning. They're not there by accident. So it is, to me, evidence that the Bible is the inspired word of God. But I want you to think about this, and let's go a step further. God creates all living things. Then these codes, they show up in nature. So as you would expect in our natural world, that there is going to be intent and intelligent design when it comes to all living systems. So as you saw in the video, we even have molecular motors, molecular machinery that is in our body. Things that are highly complex that 100, 200 years ago was never even expected to have existed. But it does exist. And we can use this information to create new technology that never existed before. And we're really just getting started with this. So God creates all things, and like an artist, God signs his fingerprint in nature, leaving it there for us to find. So this is incredibly exciting to me because it means that when the Bible was written thousands of years ago, they didn't have modern technology like spectrophotometry, where they could analyze lobster blood and then say, okay, we're going to write the book of Genesis so it lines up with lobster blood, right? That didn't happen. God creates all living things, and this pattern is in our very DNA. It's the makeup of who we are. And it means as a race, we're all united. We're all human beings. We shouldn't be fighting and killing each other. We should be uniting with one another. Now, there's something else that goes with this. As you might expect, I looked other places in the Bible, and the next one that I went to was the Tree of Life. So I'm going to be talking about this more. I'm actually running a little bit ahead, which is great. I have a little bit more time to talk about this today, which I wasn't expecting. So I'll tell you about the story of the Tree of Life, right? Well, you'll all know the story. That's not what I mean. So the Tree of Life, we know that when there's the fall of man, I'm certainly not going to blame women, not here. We all know what happened. But there's the fall of man, and what God says is, okay, we have to separate now human beings from the Tree of Life. And so you could say then in the beginning that human beings were designed to be immortal, that we were never designed to age. And so there was a mechanism that existed on this planet to prevent us from aging. Just like lobsters never age, planaria, hydroctinia, tardigrade, these living systems. And by the way, did you notice that these living systems live in water? And they're found in seawater. So there has to be a connection there. So if a mechanism was put onto our planet to prevent human beings from aging, and it was this thing called the tree of life, we obviously don't have this here today where we can look at it and examine it scientifically, but what we do have is the mathematical code in the story of the tree of life. So I looked at that code, and I distilled that code down into a number. And that number, when I looked into the scientific literature, was a wavelength of light that stimulated the production of telomerase. And when I looked at the compound that was responsible for that, I found it in lobsters. It all comes together. So the technology that you're going to see today incorporates all of this information. What we did was we started from very primitive prototype in our lab that was gigantic, it was expensive, it was functional, and we were able to do our initial studies. And then over a period of years, we began to refine this process and finally put it into something that someone could use in their home. But what we want to really know is, this is all intellectually interesting. What we really want to know now, though, is what effect does drinking this water have on the human body? What we want to find out is that when we drink this water, is it indeed making any change within us? And that's what we're going to take a look at. So let's go to the video.